How are you?
Kim, I'm just checking to see what condition my condition is in.
I love that. I don't know what condition I'm in either. I'm just gonna fake it till I make it.
I ain't even trying to fake it. I did absolutely nothing today. Nothing.
Well, you look wonderful. You look wonderful.
Thank you. The only thing I'm waiting for is the knob, my replacement knob for my, it's almost like the universe is aligning itself to force me to move back to Massachusetts. Every day it's something, why are you here? And some days 2 or 3 times
Incidents.
something happens. The air conditioner went out Saturday. Can you imagine living in Florida with no air conditioning?
Where is here? Oh, Florida. Oh.
Yeah, I'm in South Florida. I'm in the Atlantis land. And I don't know, it's just, so yesterday I tried to do something productive, like clean my floors. And I looked over after I had moved everything away, and I have all these specialty products for the marble and for the Tarantine tile and a blah blah blah, and I've got like 5 different mops, and I've got enough microfiber cleaning towels to start a dollar store. And I looked up and I saw all these streaks. Oh God. I need to go back to work. This thing about, I think it's a thing about being home all day. But I do have to tell you all this. Who we waiting for?
We're not really waiting. I don't know if Gio is gonna join us tonight or not. I haven't seen her around today.
Well, I got a new doctor. Finally found a doctor. And y'all talking about some lump of handsome, gorgeous man. Oh my God, I could stop. See, El Michelle knows how to act. Me and him would have been like.
I know, I got a doctor like that.
Girl, and all I could think about was watching the outline of his legs in his slacks. Then he had the nerve to turn around. Oh, God. 36 years old. So he's very tall, and he's not fully fulled out. He just blossomed a little bit. Oh my God. I told my granddaughter, I said, when I see him next, I'm getting his telephone number. You can call him. I mean, just so handsome. And you know how some men, when they're handsome, they're overly friendly because they know they know they're handsome and they got it going on and everything. This man was not that way. He was
even
very kind, very caring in his manner. But let me tell you how he looked. His color. It was his color. Evidently, one parent is Asian Indian and the other parent is Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
He was just so gorgeous. He could have been on I wanted to ask him if he had thought about signing up for the Bachelorette show or something like that. And then tell him to be careful not to do it. Don't do it because those white girls would just be eating him up.
Gio, you're here.
Hey, lady.
Gio.
How you guys doing?
You missed the story about BJ's new doctor, and BJ and me debriefed last Saturday night with one of your South Carolinian.
Wasn't I patient? I was so patient because if he hadn't been an older man, it'd have been a whole bunch of cussing and yelling going
Thank
on.
goodness. Okay, I'm glad.
So I thought that I was very patient and very gentle with him.
And
but
Gio's friend Joel was in the chat room with us, Kim, last Saturday night. And he was trying to call into the program. Joel used to be a part of our book group back in the early days.
Oh, okay.
So he was trying to call in, but he couldn't get through. So I told them, you know, maybe you were having...
Something was going on with the telephone lines on Saturday night because I was hearing an echo.
Yeah. Yeah, I was hearing that too. Yeah.
And what I should have done was stopped, hung up and called back in. But I didn't think that this guy was technically proficient enough to understand what I was doing, and he would do something like hang up or something. So I didn't do it. But he really got on my nerves. I had a headache after that.
All right, we broadcasted.
Because I kept saying, wait a minute, you're a sociologist, you're an anthropologist, you have studied race, you have studied the major Black philosophers, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, George Washington Carver. What the hell is going on with you?
Kim, the program was on reparations, and BJ was interviewing a professor who has a very limited view of what reparations could be.
And I kept calling it narrowly tailored. I was being
that was a nice way to frame it. Yeah, he was stuck in his century.
Because you can't dismiss that this man has lived through Jim Crow. He was born in South Carolina. He was educated at the University of Washington, which is problematic in my point. The other problematic part was, and I didn't discuss it with him because my job was not, my point was not to embarrass him or humiliate him. But if he had been 50-something years old, he'd have been embarrassed, humiliated, and I would have said, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
But so I wasn't going to do that. And it took a lot for me not to challenge him on. I wanted to say to him, what the fuck did you learn through the Jim Crow, civil rights, Black power, and the contemporary struggle and movement through the slogan of Black Lives Matter? What are you telling your students?
Well, it sounds like he's had the hope, you know, beaten out of him one way or another. And he's willing to settle, you know, for the what he believes is possible. And he just, you know, I think he's with a lot of people that can't grab hold of a vision.
He was trying to defend himself.
Yeah. But he's got company, you know, in that conservative.
And here's the real point. The real point is, and one of the reasons I invited him is the real point is that there are far more Black people who reject did you hear him say, we don't want to be beggars? Reject the notion of reparations and reject the notion that we have a valid claim.
Yeah.
Even
I
though he
bet
kept
there was a
giving all
check
the
with his
reasons
name
of
on
what
it,
the
he
claim
cashed it.
was.
I
Yeah.
just have to stop for a sec. Michelle, I had sent you my pitiful little questions and I don't see them.
I see questions.
You see
The
questions?
link, yeah, the link that brought you in here in the private group, right under the comments to that link, the agenda is there.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Sorry, BJ, go right ahead.
No,
But
we don't want to take
say,
away from your time because I need your guidance.
You're not getting much to I'm dragging tonight, so you don't want my guidance. But let's see, where am I going?
You want me to do the introduction, Kim?
Yes, go right ahead. Thank you.
While you open that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle, session 15, where we are reading really discussing the 15th book, public discussion. And we're almost done with this book. We're reading Octavia's Brood. What is it? Social science fiction stories from social justice movements, edited by Adrienne Maree Brown and Walidah Imarisha. And you can learn more about the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle on YouTube, where all of our videos are archived, as well as on Facebook, where we post invitations to these events. And if you'd like to join the conversations, please let us know. We are about done with this book. Next week is our last public discussion. We're looking forward to Nicole's facilitation on the whatever's left in the book. And but tonight we are focused on two short stories, Fire on the Mountain, an excerpt by Terry Bisson and Bisson, and Homing Instinct by Danny McLean. And I'm Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. And our facilitator tonight is Kim?
Yes, Kim Brandon. Excuse me. And I'm in New York.
Okay. And BJ?
I'm BJ Pete Graham, and here is my book. Looking forward to Kim leading me through these two stories.
Yeah. And Gio?
And I'm Georgette Moses. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm glad to be here amongst you ladies tonight.
Hey, Georgette.
You don't say yay anymore, Gio.
Oh, yay!
Let's hear that again.
What, the yay? Yay!
Hey, Michelle, when I open that document, I see all of your wonderful formatting, but I don't see my questions. So if everyone else sees it, I'm trying to figure out what I've done.
They're inside. Kim, look under key points and discussion questions.
Okay. Reference, stay in touch.
Above reference.
Selected readings, call in Zoom points.
Wait, go up. Go way up.
Okay. I'm all the way at the top, and it says the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. And it says selected readings. And it says call in Zoom entry points.
I'm posting the link to the summary, the Google Drive right now. I think you're on the wrong page, Kim.
Oh, I am definitely.
Look in
You
chat.
see it in the chat?
Yeah, I posted it in the chat.
You posted it in the chat. Okay.
So,
Thank you for that. Okay. So why don't we get started with the first story? Oh yeah, now I have 5 pages. Thank you very much. I don't know. Okay, so oh Michelle, this is beautiful. Fire on the Mountain. And so would someone like to read this summary for us?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Fire on the Mountain, excerpt by Terry Bisson. Following the Second Revolutionary War, the letter of Dr. Abraham describing his connection to John Brown is read at Harper's Ferry 100 years after the July 4th, 1859 abolitionist attack in Fire on the Mountain by Terry Bisson. A young widow negotiates relations with her mother-in-law and daughter in a new socialist U.S.S.A.
Did you want to read Homing Instinct too?
Okay. Homing Instinct by Danny McLean is a story on a West Coast resident and her friends who process how to cope with the rapid changes occurring in the country due to climate change, realizing, quote, nowhere was safe and nothing was infinite.
Thank you, BJ. And now we'll jump into the questions. And Jill, would you read question number 1? And I guess all 3 of the little sub questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Fire on the Mountain by Terry Bisson. Our history runs ahead of us, oftentimes without lighting the way. Yasmin Abraham Matin Odinga had the mission of a lifetime to bring her great-great-grandfather's papers to Harper's Ferry to be read on the 100th anniversary of John Brown's attack, 50 years after they were written, according to the old doctor's very precise instructions. Yasmin was 3 months late in more ways than one. Not only was she now expecting a child, but it was October and she was just getting the papers to Harper's Ferry. A, what do you think of Yasmin's getting the papers there 3 months late? B, why do you think that she did not ask her daughter or others for help? And C, do you feel that symbolic later generations often put aside the importance of history to pursue their own passions? What does this cost culture in the long run?
Thank you, Gio. Who'd like to get us started?
Muted. Question C, I guess, 1C. I think it costs I think because the culture a lot. And I think the same tendency costs humanity a lot. Gio and I are reading a book in another book group called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And the chapter we're on this week is looking at the axial age, which he dates between 800 BC and 600 AD. So a 1400 year period where all of the world's religions that we live with today were birthed in that period. And it was a time of a lot of philosophical ideas. It's where coins were invented and came into wide circulation. And so that brought up a lot of conflicts about profit motive. It led to a lot of wars. There was slavery in a lot of places. He focuses on China, India, and Greece. And as I read that chapter and I look at the kinds of arguments that they're having, the philosophical debates that they're having, and understanding that we're still fighting those exact same issues, and it's a bit depressing. So I think I think it's really important to be able to take the long view of history, and to understand as a person living in the current time where you are on that spectrum, and what role you can play in kind of moving us along, progress. It's like we go around in these circles, I think because we're not learning the lessons that we need to learn.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Yeah.
I'd like to add something to and respond to something Michelle said and to the question. I think oftentimes it is very difficult for people to understand that they have to translate from a collective as opposed to translating from the personal. I saw Yasmin get a certain amount of personal pleasure in giving the gifts. And what I concluded was the gift giving was about her as opposed about the person that the people that she was giving the gift to. And an example is her mother-in-law loved scarves, and she gave the scarf to somebody else and gave the mother-in-law the basket. And I'm going, this is exactly what happens in organizations, in organizing our community. The other is in terms of the time frame, that leaders often dismiss the urgency, the sense of urgency that others place in achieving goals and objectives, because their own sense of urgency is not measured in the same way. It's not the same level of urgency. For instance, we talk about in the Black struggle about the issue of housing, affordable housing. And when you go into communities and start looking at Black mobilization, people who are involved oftentimes think housing, for instance, is a priority, but in the list of priorities, it can be lower than something else when people are homeless or about to be homeless or helpless about finding adequate housing. So I was thinking about those things as I read through the what Yasmin was thinking. And the third point I want to make about her is that I think that her summary, that her experience was not well informed by the history that her grandfather had taught her. That she had insulated the historical basis from which she was working as though it wasn't important. And that's why the 3 days late was okay with her.
3 months. 3 months late.
3 months, I mean, yeah, 3 months. So those were my responses.
Well, thank you.
I was done with her for a while there.
Me too. Me too.
Well, you put the words right where they need to be about her. Because I was very disconnected with this character. Because here we have this amazing scenario, right? You know, John Brown, he was successful. People of color are, you know, fully functioning in a society, you know, feeling valued, doing things, making achievements. And she was just like, la, 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 you know, it's more important for me to, you know, have this wonderful relationship that kept me 3 months from getting these important papers, you know, to where they needed to be. And you know,
not asking for help, Gio.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah.
I'm glad you said disconnect. Because I think that was an important thing that she had done in the people in her lives. She had disconnected, even though she portended that she had not.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Because she didn't give the, you know, these were supposed to be important people in her life. And yet she gives a gift to them that she knows they're not going to appreciate, right? Right. And then I don't know whether, you know, the age difference, you know, played into it. But if they're important people in your life, you find a way to keep a connection with them, you know, over the distance and over the time. You should. So.
And that's what we do sometimes. We give people things that are not important to them, but are important to us.
That's true.
I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time choosing gifts for people because so much judgment has to be made about, is this person going to appreciate this in the same way that I appreciate it? And it is my view of them rather than their view of themselves. And if I don't, I mean, I can buy a lot of gifts to my grandchildren because I know them well. But other people, I'm careful. You know, I was even careful about my mother, not giving her something. I think you have to listen to people to understand their priorities. Yeah. You know, like my grandchildren are always saying to me, how did you know I wanted this? Because I listen. I might not say, oh, the red bicycle is a nice bicycle, blah, 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 blah. But I heard it. I heard you. talking about your red bicycle. So I don't know. And Yasmin failed miserably at this. She even misinterpreted the importance of Harper's Ferry. And I don't know if
Well,
the author...
I hate to have to always be the one to point these things out. but
Go ahead, Michelle.
but Yasmin, Yasmin is the creation of a white man.
There you go.
Wow, I'm blown away.
So it just, from what we know about white men, from our history and our even our current experiences, this sort of disconnect, this sort of, not being able to put the pieces together, this sort of insensitivity to the needs and wishes and feelings of others is kind of typical. Now, I think that this particular man writing this particular story is one of those what I call special white people who has some kind of a vision of a more equal world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he looks back on the John Brown character with admiration. And I think that he looks to a socialist future with a real desire for change. But even when you're that kind of special white person, you still have a hard time filling in gaps in your experience that you just don't have.
That explains everything.
That explains everything.
That explains everything.
I had such a hard time with this story. I just had such a hard time. And I studied Michelle because I said, okay, now first what you're going to do is check out the author before you start reading. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, then why I got to read it? It was just like every bone in my body said, he wrote it. So why I got to read it? And so his ghost was cooked from that point of seeing his picture. But I guess my thing is Harriet Tubman. If anybody in your family has something to do with Harriet Tubman, I think that is as close to God as we get.
It is the God.
Yeah, that's right. So for Yasmin to be somewhere getting pregnant while 100 years of history is flying by her, and that's why I put the word passion, so that it wasn't just like your art passion, but it could be a romantic passion. I just felt like it was that same thing of Black women are sexually craved, deprived, and here she is letting history go by because there's some man in Africa on an archaeological dig and also a physical dig where she can't pull herself away to get the right papers about Harriet Tubman and John Brown to the right spot at this. Her grandfather great-great-grandfather was waiting 50 years for this to happen. And she's just like, then she's gonna come up in there with some raggedy slippers, a scarf for the wrong person. It just felt like, how are you going to have a story that just puts Black women down so much?
But here's the point. Uh-huh. I think, Kim, you're right on it, and I was holding back from saying it. White people stories are, and as I read these things, stories are aspirational. And a white man cannot aspire for Black people, let alone for Harriet Tubman. There is no capacity for white people to understand the compelling nature of a person like John Brown.
Mm.
I can't explain to you why. I can't explain to a white person, like when I first went to the federal government, a woman in the White House said to me, "Why are you here? I just saw your resume. You here?" And I looked at her and I smiled. I said, "I'm here to free the Black people."
That's what you say.
And she laughed, but I know she didn't understand it. So here it, and I blame the editors for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, why is he even in this book?
Right.
And why isn't it the Civil War 2.0 as opposed to the Second Revolutionary War? The Revolutionary War had nothing to do about the slaves or Harriet Tubman or none of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They had already decided the fate of the slaves before the first Crispus Attucks put off the first musket or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have to tell y'all, my Crispus Attucks story, but so I'm asking, and this is what the cross that we always believe that Michelle and Gio know where I'm going. We always believe that fair is sharing with white people. And that's why our shit is so diluted and why Yasmin shows up 3 months late.
Oh, yes. What an insult. What an insult. This story is so insulting on so many different levels. I can't believe it. And what does Nikki Giovanni say? Please don't have no white people telling the story about me because they're going to get it all wrong.
It would have been so much better if he had told it from
the white perspective.
Right.
As though white people are not obligated to have aspirations for human rights for all. They got to be in our shit.
Right. But, if he had just written the story about John Brown.
No, John, what about, let's write a story about John Brown Master and a little white boy that grew up on that plantation and he aspired to have free slaves. And he was growing up, okay, Kim, here I go. That he was going to grow up and have a plantation and all the slaves was going to get paid. And they get free houses and they can have their church and they can have their school on this plantation and eat all the food they want. Why isn't that sci-fi for white people?
Yeah.
And then we'll throw some chain shifters in there for Kim. But but I'm telling you, I mean, this is the most animated I have been all day long. If I was one of those people who could lay in the bed all day, I'd have been laying in the bed all day. But I tried it, but I didn't last more than 10 minutes twice.
Okay.
So anyway, I appreciate you, Michelle and Kim and Gio, bringing up these points. Because it's very nice to not feel like you're so outrageously enraged that perhaps you might be mad and people don't appreciate your madness.
Right. Right. That's why I do these book groups, BJ, because I need to know that other people see what I see, because what I see.
This was hard. This was a hard one. This was a hard one. And I think the other point is, do we need a white author to legitimize the project?
Mm.
That's what I'm saying about trying to be fair. Black people need to cut this out. I go back to Dr. Taylor during Black History Month talking about we're the only people that learn forgiveness. Nobody else feels obligated to forgive anybody, but we forgive everybody.
Mm. Yeah.
So I agree.
I guess,
but he does he think because he named somebody Yasmin that makes him a writer in the tradition of Octavia Butler? That's what I want to know.
We need to get him on here and grill him.
I know.
We need to get the editors to understand if Octavia Butler, you're saying that this is her brood, and we bought this book thinking that these were stories that guided us into a future. And then it turns out that these aren't even stories for the most part that we wrote, and the ones that we did write. So I'm just feeling so like, okay, when we read another book, Crunch Feminism, and we were just going like, what now? I think that Michelle said it so well then. People have to cut their teeth on something. But it's still our responsibility as readers to go back and say, could you get a little better at this? Could you do this better next time? Because this was on your watch. This was on your watch. I found this story when I saw this guy. I was just like, now what now? I know you got 500-600 entries, submissions to be included in this book. And I do have gone to conferences where people aspire to write like Octavia Butler. So where's their work? And I keep waiting for that story that says, oh, we're here in the future. But each of these stories just keep saying to me, wait a minute, you're pregnant now? Wait. What now? Yeah. And your daughter don't even like the shoes that you got her. And why are we talking about these damn shoes? What does that have to do with John Brown and Harriet Tubman?
Yes.
Who picked this story?
Well, I just want to say on behalf of the devil
yeah,
that there are plenty of white folks involved in social justice movements, and maybe we are bringing our own desire that this had been primarily written by Black people or people of color, which is maybe not what the intent of the editors ever was. What's the book we read by the Hispanic women? Oh God.
This Bridge Called My Back.
Right, that one. This Bridge Called My Back.
And she stole that from Julia Hare.
Oh.
But
their intent was to bring the stories of multicultural women to the page. I'm not exactly sure what the intent of these editors was. And, we're almost done with the book, but
I don't want to. I think that I don't want us to backpedal on this book, and maybe we should write the editors and say our book club read the book, and here's where we think you went wrong. And you should not apologize. if you ended up with a book that was all Black writers and actually reflected the tradition of Octavia Butler. I mean, even if you take this story, Firestone Mountain, whatever. What is the title of this
Fire
story?
on the mountain.
Oh, okay, Firestone. Even if you take some of what he has written here and you trace it back to Octavia Butler's book, where there was a time traveler who went back and forth between slavery and contemporary Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And part of what Butler does in that particular book, I can't think of the name of the book.
I think it was
Kindred?
Fledgling, wasn't it? Fledgling. Oh,
Fledgling.
Kindred. It was yeah.
Fledgling or Kindred. I read her books so much that I get lost.
It was
But
probably Kindred. Now that I think
here is this woman. She is learning something in this transition. She is teaching. Butler is teaching the reader something in every one of those transitions. One is historical, the other is spiritual, and the other is cultural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think that some of these writers in some of these stories understand that that is the transition, that is the tradition, that Octavia Butler, that is how she makes a difference as a sci-fi writer. I mean, you can be transformed by her writing, her stories.
Yeah.
Kim, tell the story about the person running up to you talking about she read the book in class.
Yeah, I was at the doctor's office. This beautiful young Black girl comes over, and I was reading the book, and she says, "Oh, you're reading that book? We're using that in my class." And it is just so phenomenal about how the stories helped her so much. And I was like, "Really?" And she was just like, "Yeah." So she said that she was going to join us in the reading because I gave her the link. And so I think that was also how I got this misunderstanding of what this book was. And so when you actually read the summary of this book, it is closer to what it says it is than what I thought it was going to be. And once I heard Octavia Butler, and they don't say that this is an Octavia Butler book. They said, whenever we envision a world without war, without prisons, without capitalism, we are producing visionary fiction. Organizers and activists enlisted and try to create such worlds all the time. This book brings 20 of them together in the first anthology of short stories to explore the connections between radical speculative fiction and movements for social change. It does not, this book was not about showing African Americans in a better light or showing them in a better light in the future, even if the future is the past, given in the story that we're reading. So Yasmin is right on point for if they are looking for creating these visionary stories, this is his vision. And so I'm disappointed that I thought more of the book than the book actually is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't feel visionary. It doesn't feel visionary to me.
Well, I was excited that they, I mean, one of the things that Octavia Butler worked so hard at, and that is to have a cultural and spiritual place for Black people in science fiction. She was committed to that. And so I was looking forward to this book. I wasn't looking for Octavia Butler. I was looking for a new generation of Butler tradition writers. You know, like if I
and maybe that's not what they, even are aspiring to.
Then I must be Octavia's brood. And
I wanted Kim to tell the story about the young lady who was so excited about it, to say that I have heard in various reviews that I've read, things about this book, that it is used in a lot of classrooms. And we are almost finished with this book, and I don't understand why. And I wonder, are we missing something?
No, we're not. We're not. We're all very well read. Okay. And just because something has a very catchy title doesn't mean it's going to live up to the title that they created. Right. And I think on your point, about why it's being used everywhere. Well, look at the timing. Oh, we're having some social strife. Let's show that we're woke and pick this book to teach about it. It's okay, not throwing the Tupac courses under the bus, but it feels like the same kind of thing, doesn't it? Kind of disingenuous, because what are the results, going back to what you said about what have we learned from all of this thing, going around and around the same thing, if you're teaching it, what are they learning? And then what will they put to use from it? What will they create? What things will they stop?
But
how can they transform, the world that we're living in?
Absolutely, Georgette, because one of the things that kept pinging in my brain with reading this particular story was, this is some more of the mystical, magical, fantasy Harriet Tubman. I mean, white people don't understand, don't convey in their literature, in their writings, even historical writings, that Harriet Tubman spent most of her adult life peeing in the woods, being afraid. Nobody talks about her sexuality. Nobody talks about her aspirations. She wasn't just a woman who wanted to free other people. She also wanted to be free herself. So here is another, the magical Harriet Tubman, like she hovered above the earth and grabbed people by their collars and maybe got a snake bite every now and then. And I suspect, and we all should suspect to a certain degree, about how other Black people betrayed her and what that meant for her and what it meant for her safety. But nobody's writing about that. But going back to the science fiction piece, I'm waiting for the book where they bring as soon as they hit Jamestown, some African woman has, y'all write this down, Gio, because you could write a book, Kim, y'all. I'm waiting for the amniotic fluid of an African slave to permeate the soil in Virginia, South Carolina, and that someone, now you're talking about magical, someone took the, what do you call that thing? The sack. I've been so far away from childbirth that I can't. What do you call
No,
it?
you're right. The embryonic sac. No, you're right.
What do you call it though? What do you call it? What's the word?
Afterbirth.
Afterbirth. Once it's
Afterbirth.
out, yeah, it's afterbirth.
The afterbirth. And cut it up into 50 pieces, all designed. Not this shape shift, but to go into the soil. And it does something special for Black people 500 years later.
Woo! Go ahead. That's the book.
That's the book I'm waiting
Wow.
for. That's the book I'm waiting for.
That's the book.
Well,
The shit rises up through the cold and the heat.
I think we spent enough time on Terry Bisson. Let's talk about the Black woman story. Listen, I'll be right back, and I'm going to put my speaker on mute, because you know this week we had the man that was playing with himself, got his job back.
Oh.
Tobin. You mean Tobin?
What are you trying to say, Michelle?
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to mute my mic and my camera.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
What you gonna do with your mic? What you gonna do?
Oh my God.
I'm taking a restroom break. That is all.
Okay.
That sounds a little dicey there. I don't mean to.
But you can hear us, right?
Yes,
you can hear us, and we can't hear you. Okay.
Yes.
I want to ask Kim and Georgette about their impressions on the mother-in-law. It's really interesting that while he makes a big deal of her presence, he doesn't make her a major lesson teacher, or I think characters are either they set it up or I don't know.
Oh no, you have a good point. She seemed like just some window dressing, a character for Yasmin to bounce off, or reflect her own shortcomings, or in her feelings about religion, right? Because Jesus has to have the pies, right? So I'm like, it was so, I'm glad I wasn't alone in the reading, the feelings that I was feeling reading this. I'm like, what's the point? What are you trying to say?
I could not take this reading this thing. He was just trying to do too much. I mean, the Egyptian cars that were so 20 feet long, and then these shoes that, we went into 2 or 3 paragraphs about these shoes that are going to shape shift onto your feet, and you never have to do anything with them ever again in life.
Yeah, but the kid wasn't excited about it, right?
What that got to do with John Brown? I was just like, what that got to do with John Brown? I just wanted to snatch him up and say, look, you're doing too much. Just you're trying to tell 20 stories at once, and you don't follow any thread to the end. Not one thread did he follow from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Not the pregnancy, not the shoes, not the ring mother, which I just said ring mother.
Yeah. I wanted to know, but what does that really mean? What's going on in this society?
That was the mother-in-law, I guess, for the wedding
when you
ring.
get married, you get a ring, and the mother becomes the ring mother. He was just making I like that little touch, but he was just making some shit up.
Nor did I ever see him spell out what U.S.S.A. stands for.
Yeah, we're just supposed to know it's like socialist, but how did they get there? But
keep in mind, it was an excerpt.
It was an excerpt,
and I'm not looking forward to the book.
I'm about tired of these excerpts, okay? They leave the good stuff out.
Yeah, you lose so much.
This was too much.
Even
God forbid they gave it to all of us, give us the whole story, because it was just trying to do too much.
Now that I know who the author is, I feel like he doesn't have any real Black friends, and the ones he has are shallow, right? They're
Mhm,
very shallow.
mhm,
He needs
mhm.
some. He need to know some old soldiers, okay?
Uh-huh.
But you know, I hate to say this, Georgette, but when you're an old soldier, it's hard to maintain your friendships with white people. It's just like I have had wars with almost everybody because I'll just go, what you say?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm weary right now because the friendships are being frayed because they say something and then you go, can I offer you my point of view?
Mhm.
And they are shocked that my point of view was not given to me by them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm,
You know,
So
a,
wow.
a, a funny story in that regard. A couple of years ago, Tara would call me and say, "Mom, in the break room, people at work, and most of the people that she works with are engineers. I mean, MIT, Stanford, engineers, designers, blah blah blah."
Mhm.
And she said, "Mom, they bring all these books into the break room after they, I guess, finish reading them or whatever. And it's all these Black books. It's about Black history. It's about Black this and economics and the Black." And she said, "I'm wondering if they're trying to send me a message." So she said she started she started writing notes. Like one note, she had me on the floor. She said, "I wrote a note that said, if you read this whole book, you would want to keep it in your library for later reference."
Okay.
She said, I don't want these white people thinking that maybe they bring in these books in and I would appreciate their efforts at addressing whatever they're addressing, but it's really funny." So she said, I'm taking the books because you can take the books if you want. And she says, "I'm taking all these books that I think my son should read, and I'm taking them home."
Okay.
She said, "Because I looked up some of these books on Amazon to get a summary of them, and every Black person should read his books, but I just can't figure out why all these white people are, it's, I said, "Well, usually in the break room at work, it's fiction paperbacks and stuff that people bring in." And she said, "These are hardcover books and they are serious books." She says, "And I'm gonna start taking them." But you're right,
Yeah.
Kim.
Wow.
And I think that we do have a generation like my daughter and her friends. They're saying, "Look, I go to work and I'll work with them, but I'm not building any personal relationships with these white people. They have nothing to offer to me, and it's too much struggle to have personal relationships with them."
Mhm,
I do have relationships, but I think there's this agreement that you don't cross this line and I don't put you back onto the other side.
Hmm.
And as long as we understand that, we're good.
Hmm.
But at no point can I be 100% myself and just help ask. I would love to talk to some of those friends and say, this just happened to me with one of your people. Could you help me understand how this could possibly be? Let's unpack this. But I don't know people where I could call and say, let's unpack this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's what I like to find more of. I was hoping to get, and I do get some of that from some of my organizations, but I really would like, and so I think somebody was just saying, I want to understand you. I want to understand you. You keep thinking that it's all about y'all understanding me, but when you're the one with the foot on my neck. So I need to understand when, if ever, you're going to take your foot off,
Hmm. Hmm.
as opposed to you writing books and me writing books about how bruised my neck is
Mm.
and how heavy the foot is.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's just a part of me that feels like could we talk about why the foot is there, and at what point will you feel less threatened and take it off?
I know.
I've always found white folks on the left end of the spectrum are very good, or can be very good, about seeing racism in other white people and willing to acknowledge it and, you know, call it out and all of that. The only problem they have is if you point it out in them personally. That can get real ugly real fast. But I tend to have a lot of patience, you know, for somebody that wants to learn. And I think it's good for them to do the reading, you know, because I'd love for a white person to be here in a discussion group like this, you know, having actually read something, because just because we're reading the same thing doesn't mean we're seeing the same thing. And I don't remember which book it is we read, but I mean, BJ, you see all the kind of questions we come up with and the deep analysis we go into. And I saw some questions that a white person had come up with related to the entire book. And there were like 10 questions. And it was stuff like the way he used water as a metaphor. It was just like, did we read the same book?
You know, because I'm older, very early in my career, I mean, I went to all white colleges and universities. I graduated from all white high school. And I have allowed professional relationships over the years to develop into personal relationships. And many of those relationships didn't survive. And the reason that it didn't survive is because there are many tests that come along over time. I mean, you know, I had a secretary, for instance, I had the same secretary for 14 years. And she was with me in 3 different companies. I took her with me because she was good at what she did. When I got off an airplane, the groceries were in the trunk of my car on Friday night. If I had a problem with care for my daughter while I was traveling, I knew that I could call her and say, do whatever it is. I don't know what's going on, but fix it. And she was willing to fix it. She was an executive assistant, not a secretary. But anyway, over the years, she wasn't growing and understanding herself as a white woman and what that meant in the context of Blackness. So I think what happens is that some, especially white women, get into relationships believing, oh, I must be special because this Black woman likes me. She allowed, and one of the things they don't recognize, that you ain't in the circle. You're on the outer rim. In the circle, you can't even see the circle. And they failed the test. They failed the test over and over. And the relationship becomes about them rather than a relationship, the mutuality of the relationship. So
Yeah, I'm gonna try to
pardon me?
move us on to the next question.
Okay.
So finish your thought, and then we'll move
No,
on.
no, no. I just said, you know, they're not. I think at some point when they are required, and this is what's happening with the white feminist movement that thinks that they are universal, feminism thinking it's universal, is that essentially they're not willing, they don't have the capacity to give up stuff.
And
But
I also think that I agree with you 100%. But I also think that it's so complex, because then you have women of color who are feel so special that they have white friends, that relationship between that white woman and that Black woman is not the same relationship between you and a white woman. So that's a whole other level of complexity, as when Black women feel special because they have that friend and will do anything to make that friend comfortable and to keep that friendship year in and year out. And so, even if that means always being the one that's somebody is bending down to help, as opposed to being peers. And for me, I need to be peers. I don't want you to call me up and say, oh, Kim so-and-so is in jail and I'm going to try to get her a lawyer and I'm going to try to, no, honey. I I prefer to be thirsty than drink from your cup. So I'm wondering if somebody wants to read question number 2. Michelle, would you mind reading question number 2?
No problem. Homing Instinct by Danny McLean. When EO, Executive Order, I guess, 3735 came down, I got nostalgic for the things around me. I got greedy for things that likely wouldn't be around much longer. The government was now controlling travel in the hope of saving the planet. Only sky points could be used for travel now. Just like with COVID, do you fear that the poor and people of color will be impacted with the worst outcomes when a travel ban goes into effect? B, the law will require that every person select the location and stay put. Those that don't select the location will be jailed. Do you feel this law would open a door for systemic abuse? Why? C, as we look at climate change and hard choices, the impact on family, safety, and permanence, what can we be sure of? And how do we go about adjusting to this new world? How do you decide where to live and for how long?
I guess we jump to the next question. I was hoping you'd read question number 2.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad you read all that. So I guess I'll just read the last little bit of this story, and then we could jump to the next story. So if there's anything, I wanted to ask, and then we'll move on since Michelle just read that. I wanted to ask, how did the author use technology and science fiction, and did it add or take away from the story? That was the thing that resonated with me as to what was that actual helpful, or was that something to make the story qualify for this collection? How did you feel about the use of technology and science fiction in the Fire on the Mountain piece?
What were there? The supersonic planes and
There were
Egyptian
planes, there were
cars.
special crews. She had that giant Egyptian car. I was trying to think. And then it was that whole thing with
being on Mars.
even though we were in the 1950s, it was so much more advanced than the 1950s that we know. So did any of that add to the telling of whatever the theme of this story was? Or did it complicate things? I'm just wondering what people thought.
Well, I think that 1950s piece was complicating to me, because that's not the 1950s we know. And, you know, who wrote it? Terry Bisson could have just as easily picked 2059. You know, he could have picked another day. So you know, that just felt unnecessary to me. The other technology was just, you know, as you said before, it's like there are a lot of different stories going on here. And I do think that if Octavia's Brood is going to keep up the short story business, they should not do this. They should ixnay on the excerpts.
Yes.
Because you know it's not working.
Yeah,
and so
it has to show it's somehow rising up or rising out or something.
Yeah. So so the technology was just like, you know, maybe if we were reading the fuller story, they would have made some sense. But in the context that we had of the excerpt, they were like superfluous.
Yeah.
And they weren't exceedingly amazing technologies. It wasn't something I felt like, well, I could have thought of that myself. You know, it's like they were in both these stories, they're talking about just a new design on something that already exists, as opposed to something brand new and beyond the imagination.
I thank you for that. And I think for me, I wanted to understand, I just needed, maybe that was in the other part of the excerpt, how 1959 got that way. So I know that if we're talking about enslaved people and all of a sudden now they got spacecrafts within 50 years, I kind of want to know how that happened. I kind of want to know what as somebody else said, what the U.S.S.A. is and how that got to be that way. It just felt like you just can't throw stuff up there without it having some level of believability. So I just felt like some of the technology was just like, say what now? Wait a minute, how'd you get that way without Apple computer coming first? Wait, it was just like, what now?
Yeah.
So that threw me, that took me even more out of the story, that, you know, they had all of this special ways of traveling and everything, that I was just like, I don't understand. And then I think he had an issue with where we were. Like there were so many times I'm reading this and I'm saying, are we at the kids' school still? Or are we back at the ring mother's house? I just needed more transitioning so that I knew time and place. So I was saying, well, maybe that's a part of the technology that you're not understanding, that you can actually drive 200 miles an hour. Wasn't her car able to drive 200 miles an hour?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't believe that.
And 200 miles per hour, you have cars now that drive 200 miles per hour. um, I I just didn't think that they displayed a great deal of imagination.
Yeah.
You
When
know,
did Ford come out with the first automobile? So how do we get from that to 200 miles an hour
yeah,
in 30, 40 years?
yeah, yeah. The transitioning was really, really poor. And it wasn't, you have to keep in mind that sci-fi is futuristic.
Mhm. And
So
we've seen just about everything already. So you really better bring it. Okay.
You better bring it.
Right.
You better bring it. You better bring it. Especially if you're gonna make the pass into a sci-fi pass. That's a skill set that you better have. You better know that.
Yes.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. Did anybody have one last comment before we move to the last story for our last 15 or so minutes?
I didn't
Well,
understand why the name was Yasmin instead of Yasmin. Well, that would have been more futuristic.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at Octavia Butler's characters and their names, every name has some kind of symbolism that's connected to something.
I think that's where we got in trouble. I think that's where we got in trouble because this was called Octavia's Brood.
Mm-hmm.
That we kept thinking that it had something to do with Octavia Butler's standards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this book just does not. I don't think that. I don't even see them saying that this was like. I don't see that them saying that there's a connection between that level of. What's a word that's not shady?
Not shady.
You know,
Look, they
I just
shot
think
for
that
the stars and they reached something a lot
made
lower.
that link. I made that link from other reviews of this book that I had heard, I had read, that it was in that genre of Octavia Butler. And now that I'm reading it, I'm like, who wrote that review? So I think that if we could separate the two, I never would have read this book. But now that we were in it knee deep, I don't think that the editors were saying that we are writing in that tradition. So I'm saying all of this to say, I think we need to separate one standard from this because this is not that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think calling it Octavia's Brood was, a marketing technique, because as you said, we wouldn't be reading it.
Possibly so. And I just want to bring up that Leonie, bless her heart, wherever she is, making great moves in the upper provinces, did warn us that this wasn't worth our time.
She said, what now?
She did say, we probably shouldn't read this because it wasn't worth. Well, she just said she wasn't impressed, right? Because
I
of
forgot that.
So
the
she
language.
had already read it.
Yeah.
I don't remember her saying that.
Yeah. And my memory is not the best, but I do remember that she was a thumbs down on it.
Talking about this round. I wish we had listened to her, but she is actually doing some work with the Brooklyn Society of Ethical Culture this coming Sunday at 11 o'clock. So I can send you all the link. She's doing a talk on, oh gosh, what's the talk on?
Nonviolent communication.
It's nonviolent communication, but it's specific to self-compassion in nonviolent communication along racial lines, finding the self-compassion for yourself when you're having these conversations. So that's going to be on Sunday at 11 o'clock. So if y'all want to come, I can send you the link.
Yes, please do. Please share.
I will. She's phenomenal. Everywhere she goes, people are like, get me on your schedule. So in all fairness, I wanted to know if anybody had anything they wanted to talk about that last bit that Michelle just read for us on the next story, homing instinct. Michelle, you want to get us started?
Well, I mean, I think the climate change issue, the environment has always been pretty intriguing to me. I wish more people cared more deeply about it. Because really, I believe that if we don't figure it out, then all the other social justice issues and concerns that we have won't matter. And I posted an article just a few minutes ago talking about how, you know, that brief moment that we saw in the early days of the pandemic where the birds were singing and the trees were laughing and
yes,
all of that. That in this short period of being back to life as we knew it, it did help the climate. It did help the climate a little bit, but we are now right back where we were. You know, in the same state of emergency, without people having really learned anything, that this really is about changing our behavior, our creature comforts, the things that we love so much. It's really about making the commitment, just as we made when we had to stay inside because of COVID, making the commitment to drastic changes in our behavior. And my fear is that we can't handle it.
You're absolutely right.
Did anybody see the news the past couple of days where the West is just about out of water? The governor of Utah is asking people to pray for rain. Like, how long has this been going on?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see
and the
that.
temperatures too. The temperatures on the West Coast are running much higher than that. How did my thing come up? The temperatures on the West Coast have been running 100, 110 from Nevada west. So with that and the drought and the risk of wildfires, both in the desert as well as in the forest. So I think what the story does, it gives you a lot of thinking. And I don't know, I think it was the character Robin, who talked about how we sit in our own cynicism. Was it Robin?
So it was Robin, Tony, and Paloma.
Yeah, and I think that's what we do, because as is pointed out in the story, we're not willing to give it up.
And the resources are not infinite.
So this story really is about capitalism as much as it is about climate destruction, deterioration, and our self-destructive ways in which we think about the places where we live.
Yeah.
And I got the sense that the story really was getting people to about the moving and finding a place where you want to live is kind of hollow because there was no assignment that said if you live here, I mean, and she had no room to do this in the story. If you live here, then you can't have a car.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
can't, I mean, there were just no rules. So your people are self-assigning, and I couldn't see how they were going to be living any different from where they were already. The question on being jailed for not self-assigning, I couldn't get the point of that. You know, I could see the laws which had to do with if you don't give up your televisions, your plasma televisions, if you don't give up this, if you don't give up that, because these are the rules, you go to jail. It's just like COVID. If you don't get vaccinated, you can't come out your house. That's what was happening in China, by the way. The military was actually going around in some of the smaller towns and boarding people inside, nailing boards across their doorways where they couldn't get out. So, but the story doesn't go into a reflection of what happens if people don't move beyond the conclusions that the writer is making that has to be made, the decisions. You know, like it's, I mean, I think in COVID, what we're going to have now is the question of children being vaccinated, and I don't think we've seen the craziness that's going to go on once a vaccine is available to children ages 5 to 12. And these people can't see that we've always had laws about vaccinating children. Polio, smallpox, and all those other things that they give babies at birth, whatever they are.
I guess when I was asking
I'm gonna I think it's Sanjay Gupta, I don't know who it is, but I saw a podcast today I'm gonna listen to tonight, and the subject is the importance of trust in public health. And and certainly we have seen how that issue has played out in COVID. And with all of the climatic changes that we can anticipate in the future, some of which we're going to experience in our lifetime, those same trust issues that we've seen in COVID are going to come out. So in this story, you got to move away from the eroding beaches, and we're going to pay you, to move. But at some point, there's not going to be payment. You're just going to have to move because it's over, But there's so many things. When the ocean comes up on the beach and it swallows your house, that's a very visual thing. You see it. When the forest goes up in flames and won't stop burning, that's a very visual thing, and you see it. But coronavirus is an example of the kind of thing that you don't see with your bare eyes. And there are a lot of things going on in the air that we don't see with our bare eyes. And so because government and science have broken our trust so thoroughly over the years, it's hard to respond when they say, take an action based on this thing that you can't even see with your own eyes. I don't know how we get there. I mean,
well, you know, I think that one of the things that the basis of public trust is you're right, is a major thing. For instance, you talk about the houses that get swallowed up by the ocean. That happens on the coast of Massachusetts every frigging year. Hingham, Swampscott, Quincy, those people build those houses so they have a great view of the ocean. And then the public has to then acquire the cost of trying to keep their houses from being swallowed. And when they are swallowed, they build right back up instead of, and it's a Jersey Shore too. And instead of saying, okay, this area, you can't build anything, any residences. You can't live here. And one of the things that since I moved to Florida, is that Mar-a-Lago and all those estates and places over in Palm Beach, all the way down the coast to Key West, people have been allowed to have private beaches. How is that possible that you own the ocean?
Wow. I'm looking at the time, and we are over time. What I'd like to suggest is that we end and then continue the conversation. I do need to make a quick phone call once we end. But I think I'm really digging this conversation. So we will be back next week. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Kim, for the questions. You know, I wasn't really thrilled with either one of these stories, so I didn't know how much chat we were going to get out of it, but I know the crew. So thank you for getting us started, and we will see you next week reading our story together. And ladies, don't go anywhere.